Not because suffering is new, not because pain is rare, but because the institutions once trusted to ease that suffering are vanishing. Systems built to protect the vulnerable are being dismantled. Justice, silenced. Education, under attack. Compassion, forgotten. And in the wake of that collapse, God is asking, who will welcome the stranger? Who will feed the hungry? Who will care for the sick? We will. With courage rooted in faith, with a calling grounded in grace, with a bold commitment that says, all are loved. Because hope doesn't wait, and neither can we. This is not about waiting for change to come. This is about becoming the change that's needed right now. This moment matters.
Bishop Williamston, delegates, clergy colleagues, and guests, as the video introduction reminds us, this moment matters. The guest gathering matters, this worship we offer, the hospitality we share, the love we embody, it matters. Again, my name is Van Stinson, joining me here for this presentation in order to provide a strategic framework for the work ahead of us, our time together based on what we have seen, heard, discovered, and learned over the past 3 years. Our Reverend Allie Young, Director of Equipping Ministries and Leadership Development, Reverend Chad Brooks, our Congregational Vitality Strategist, Reverend Robert Johnson, our Black Church Vitality Strategist, Mr. Joseph LaBeouf, one of our Interim Conference Youth Strategists, and Ms. Susie Cox, our Associate Lay Leader and also the Chair of our Strategic Implementation Team. As you all remember, on January the 1st of 2023, we welcomed Bishop Dolores J. Williamston to Louisiana as she began her assignment as the resident bishop of our conference. Immediately, her boots hit the ground. She toured the conference, making 16 stops across Louisiana, preaching and teaching, listening, learning, and discerning how best to lead us forward with hope. Shortly after arriving, she engaged church strategist and consultant John Wimberly and began to listen even more closely. 12 focus groups made up of both lay and clergy were hosted. Hopes and dreams about the future of the Louisiana Conference were shared, and she didn't stop there.
Since 2023, there have been 3 additional listening sessions with young clergy women, young clergy men, 8 more listening sessions with laity and clergy at the Wesley Center in Woodworth, 6 coffees with clergy, 8 listening sessions with our Black churches around the conference. In total, since Bishop Williamston's arrival, y'all, there have been 53 listening sessions in the last 3 years. In addition to this, Bishop Williamston likes to drive, and she has traveled up and down, east and west, all over this state. I think her total is nearly 100 local churches that she has stopped at. And each time Bishop listens and learns, what are you joyful about? What are you curious about? And what do you hope for this conference? She has appointed superintendents and directors. She has deployed strategists, and her instructions have been simple and to the point. Be curious. Be good listeners. Ask curious questions so that together we can learn what is needed, what is hoped for, and how we might best resource and support the work of making disciples for transformation and renewal. And friends, we have been listening. We have heard your longing for children and youth to be more present in your church. Not just present, but active, leading, learning, and using their God-given gifts for the church today, not just the church in the future. We have heard your longing for more leaders to rise up out of the pews, not just for new clergy, but for lay leaders who will claim their own calling and step out in faith and build, connect, and equip the church for a transformative future. We have heard your questions about how we should share our faith, how we should tell our story about what God is doing in our lives, and how we reach new people, how we let folks know that there is a place for them to reclaim a word that has fallen out of favor in some circles, how we evangelize. We have heard you proclaim that God is still working, still calling, and still leading us into a bright, bold, hopeful, and joy-filled future for United Methodists in Louisiana. We have been listening, and we have also been learning. Our strategists have been at work throughout the conference over the past 2 years, identifying our strengths and identifying our areas of opportunity and aspiration. They have been building relationships, reconnecting with our congregations, collecting data, and discovering possibilities. And as we begin our time together, we want to share with you some of the things that we have learned and that we believe will help us understand our current reality and shape our future strategic work together.
Good day to you, friends. I'm Reverend Chad Brooks, a white male clergy, and I've had the honor of serving for the last few years as a congregational vitality strategist. Now, you might remember last year's annual conference, our bishop gave me a new nickname, or a new title, and she officially referred to as my data nerd. And based on conversations I've had with many of y'all over the last few years, the name is honest, it sticks, Bishop. I willingly accept it. And people always ask me, they said, Chad, what fun data do you know? And so I was like, I can't come to conference and not just share a couple of interesting things with you this morning as part of this report. And so in 2025, our combined worship attendance declined from 2024. And 24, it was 13,283, and in 25, it was 12,850. Now, you might be asking yourself, Chad, why are you leading with this? You lead with the good stuff. Remember I told you about something interesting? So there's a larger theme that's my report that's about what we're currently discovering. And here's the thing. You know, last year, and this is among the churches that reported. You know, every year churches don't report things in the statistical audit. You know, you need to make the audit your best friend. You might ask yourself the question, does anybody ever read this thing? It's my best friend. But so here's an interesting thing. In 2024, the median worship attendance for our annual conference was 30 people. How many of you are part of a church of 30 people? Your church is not small. Your church is the median. In 2025, the median rose by 2 people to 32. Now, you might be asking yourself the question, and I have a Rapides Parish math education, which means I don't have a math education. You're saying, Chad, how does this decline work? 433 people, but the median attendance grows. What we're learning is the fastest growing segment of our annual conferences are those churches that worship under 40 people in attendance. Our relational sized churches and our small churches are the growing edge that we have in Louisiana, and more specifically, the biggest growing edge is in our African American church, our smaller African American churches. A couple highlights. If this is your church, I want you to clap. Hope Community in Baton Rouge grew by 67% last year. St. Mark's UMC in Baton Rouge, where are you at? Grew by 50%. Bethany UMC in New Orleans has consistently seen 4 years of growth, 23% in the last year alone. Friends, this is how that median worship attendance actually grows. We have to look at where these things are happening. But overall, we've been working with this for the last year. I shared this with you last year. We spent a year inside of this information, is these size categories that we have learned in our annual conference. This is what they say. If you're churches between 1 and 40 are relational sized churches, that's 65% of our annual conference. Small churches are worship between 41 to 84. That's 18.3% of our conference. Our neighborhood-sized churches between 85 and 149 are 10.4% of our conference. Our medium-sized churches, those 150 to 349, are 5.4% of our conference. And our large churches, those of 350 plus, are 1.2% of our conference. That's who we are, friends. So what I want to share with you next is just the 3 things that I believe that we have learned over the last couple of years that are most important and imperative to share with you today. The first is this, that many of our churches are attended by people who live outside of the historic mission field of the church. And this isn't confined to any specific demographic data set or area. When we dig into it, we find it everywhere. I ask a lot of questions, and we found a lot of reasons for this. But in all types of our congregations, this is a unique issue. It matters for the sake of evangelism. It matters for community engagement. We have to realize that focusing on our physical neighbors to the church matters, and there must be different strategies depending on the unique situation. If you're curious, get in contact with me. I can help you understand this. We can pinpoint this. If you feel like this is a felt reality, we can actually run the maps and show you exactly what the reality of this is, so reach out, call me. The second thing I want to share with you is that it's an annual conference-wide necessity for us to support emerging ministries of children, youth, and adults under the age of 50. You might have been waiting for me to say young adults, right? Adults under the age of 50. 63% of the United Methodist Church is over the age of 60. Friends, it is critical for us to support children and youth and young adults, and even us median-aged adults, Gen X, there's only probably a handful. Let's get our moment. It's important for us to focus on this as we journey towards sustainability. It needs to be a strategic priority for our annual conference, but it also needs to be a strategic priority for every one of our local churches. Now, the greatest indicator of faith in adulthood is typically found during the years of childhood and adolescence. We have to be there. Again, if you want help personalizing this information, reach out. There's some things we can do to provide clarity and ways to move forward. But lastly, and I think this might be one of our biggest ones, this is the biggest realization over years of working, over years of being the bishop's data nerd. This is the thing. This is the most critical thing for a local church to be revitalized. It's not the pastor. It's not the pastor. It's not facilities. It's not money. The biggest indicator of change is a local church having the ability to have difficult conversations that lead to a future-focused change. The biggest indicator of revitalization in a local church is the congregation having conversations that lead to future-focused change. Our world is increasingly different, and our local churches need to be laser-focused on what this means to live out the Great Commission. Legacy ministry oftentimes is meeting the needs of a world that no longer exists. Missiologist Leslie Newbegin says that and he wrote this in the 1970s, y'all. He said the functional mission of many local churches is pastoral care and fellowship. These are two necessary things for the life of a congregation. But we need to be fueled with the Great Commission, focused on evangelism, and the message that Jesus is here not just to change the world, but to change each individual. This is the best work we can do to transform the world, is to introduce them to Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. My name is Reverend Robert Johnson, straight black male and a servant of God. As the Black Church Vitality Strategist, I had the privilege of traveling throughout the conference over the past 2 years. And I stand before you today to proclaim that the Black Church is alive and well in the Louisiana Conference. Our story are not failures, but stories of opportunities. Here are 3 discoveries I have made. First, our worship experience must meet the cultural needs of the people living in our local communities. Across both rural and urban settings, many Black United Methodist churches are faithful in worship, but often don't meet the invitational needs of local neighbors, especially Black neighbors. So guests don't always feel they can return. Many of our Black churches need structural repairs. And by this, I mean strengthening what supports our worship, safety, welcoming facilities, reliable hospitality, and following up system and leadership structures that can sustain our ministries. Second, our Black faith communities are resilient, faithful, dedicated to continue to do ministry despite how many show up on Sunday morning. Give yourselves a round of applause. Even in the small numbers of our Black churches, remain beacons of hope for those who come. Many of our churches keep moving forward with joy because they're still leaning on the power of God to continue us through all the trials and tribulations, just like our ancestors moved forward through bondage. And third, we have an opportunity as a conference. The conference support that strengthens both the structures and the endurance of our congregation. And it must include leadership training, coaching for local churches so they can build a leadership pipeline, sustain hospitality, worship invitation weekly, and trust first-time guests, a lesson to be belong to a ministry. When we prepare, when enables invitation coach leaders to carry the vision and honor the resilience already present, worship become a true opening door for Black and white neighbors, and the church hopes become visible in the community. We say in the Black church, joy we have, and the world didn't give it to us, and the world cannot take it away. We are here as the Black church in this conference, still believing that the Lord will make a way somehow.
My name is Joseph LaBeouf, white male laity, Southwest District. Myself, along with Brandon Tubbs, have had the privilege of being interim youth ministry strategists in the Louisiana Conference. And based on our experiences and listening to those on the ground, these are some of the recurring themes for us to lean into moving forward. So firstly, we learned that we must be attentive to the beautiful diversity within our conference and adjust our strategies to youth ministry accordingly. Our conference possesses a wonderful mix of diversity between race, congregational size, and even community context. And the way that youth ministry happens within each of these different contexts can look very different. And the ways in which that we communicate or receive communication can be very different. So moving forward, we have to communicate in ways that churches of different contexts can receive it and provide offerings that meet multiple different contexts or meet the needs of specific contexts. Next, we've discovered that our previous models of youth ministry might not be contextually relevant anymore. The previous formula a lot of times was go out and hire the young youth pastor who's going to be relatable to the teenagers, and we're going to fill the church calendar and their schedules with all of these events because they had nothing else going on, so of course they're going to show up. Those of you working in churches and parents, I'm sure you're shaking your head and laughing because that is not the reality of today. And all of these event-driven models of ministry were really geared towards how can I get more teenagers inside of our walls? But we must remember that everything that we do in youth ministry, all of the youth groups, Sunday school, the lock-ins, the mission trips, all of these different things, everything that we do at its core is to build relationships with teenagers and give them a foundation of faith that will last into adulthood. So at the local church level, I believe we can begin to shift the question from how can I get more teenagers here in our church to shift how can I build deep relationships with teenagers in our community. We're discovering that when we focus on that question, our whole metric and ideas for what a successful youth ministry looks like shifts. And thirdly, we've also learned that we have to intentionally invest in our young people and specifically our young youth ministers. On a conference level, all of the gatherings that we do, whether it's Youth Day with the Bishop or retreats or all of these other activities, we only have a short amount of time with those teenagers. However, if we focus on building relationships and networks with youth ministers who need that deep connection with others, we focus on training and coaching young youth ministers so they're not left out to the wolves to figure this thing out for themselves. And if congregations can support and grow and give them grace to try and have a little bit of failure and learn along the way, that's what our youth ministers need to feel supported and connected and guided to pour into teenagers in their local community.
Special word of thanks to all four of our strategists, and hopefully you are hearing that we have been listening. We have been listening, we have been learning, we have also been looking back. When Bishop Williamston arrived 3 years ago, she introduced all of us to the concept of Sankofa, which comes from the Akan tribe in Ghana and literally can be translated, "It is not taboo to fetch what is at risk of being left behind." In other words, many times it is helpful to look back and ask, is there wisdom from the past that could help us frame our current reality and shape our future? Is there a similar time in our history that might be able to make plain the path before us and remind us that we do not travel alone, for others have walked this way before? Are there lessons we can learn from the mistakes of the past? So we offer a Sankofa moment to help us frame our work for the remainder of this week. May it guide us in all that we do. Toward the end of January 1975, the conference newspaper, known then as the Louisiana United Methodist, ran an article that began with these words: "Evangelism adopted as a major emphasis for 1975." Bishop Finus Crutchfield was the bishop. He had been assigned to Louisiana 3 years before, just after one of the most significant moments in our history as United Methodists in Louisiana, the merger of Conference A and Conference B. Conferences that for the prior 33 years had segregated the Louisiana Conference based solely on race. The article went on to describe how this major emphasis on evangelism had come about. This comes after grassroots surveys, the article wrote, consultations and process developed by the council director and bishop after approval at the 1974 annual conference. The chairman of the Conference Board of Discipleship, the conference council director, and the bishop immediately began planning. The cabinet is key to the success of the effort. Well, Bishop, sometimes things change, don't they? The bishop will itinerate the whole conference, appearing in each district at least once during the year. That's 12, not 53. Solely in the interest of evangelism, DSs will be available for evangelistic recruitment in their respective districts. Carly's quiet. Training opportunities will be provided for pastors and laypersons. The Conference Council on Ministries Director and the Board of Discipleship are deeply involved. Local churches are the key. So this article documents that 3 years after coming together, the Louisiana Conference began to think strategically about its future, about how to reach new people, how to strengthen local churches, how to equip lay and clergy leaders, and how to tell the story of what God was doing then and through them. And yet they made no explicit commitments to honoring and celebrating their new diversity, nor did they mention working toward equity and not just settling for unity, sowing seeds that for the next 50 years would produce fruit tainted by the legacy of the central jurisdiction.
And here we are today, 3 years after the assignment of Bishop Dolores J. Williamston, 3 years after disaffiliation redefined who we were as United Methodists in Louisiana, revealing that we are only now fully coming to understand and address the lingering legacy of Conference A and Conference B in Louisiana, and attempting to think strategically yet again, while allowing the wisdom from the past to inform us in the present and guide us into the future. Wisdom like, unity mattered then, but unity that demands equity matters even more now. Evangelism mattered then, but evangelism with a commitment to honoring, celebrating, and maintaining diversity matters even more now. All churches, especially smaller churches, matter. Data mattered then, and it matters now. Strategic alignment mattered then, and it matters now. Missional priorities mattered then, and they matter now. Bishops matter, DSs matter, elected leaders of the conference matter, boards, committees, and ministry teams matter, caucus groups matter, conference staff matters, laity matter, clergy matter, laity and clergy leadership both matter. How and when and where we tell our story, it matters. Those moments in 1975 mattered, and this current moment matters, and together we all matter.
Out of this season of listening, learning, and looking back, 4 missional priorities have emerged. These 4 missional priorities are evangelizing new generations while embracing and pursuing diversity, creating a culture of call for both laity and clergy, prioritizing congregational vitality and leadership development, and faithfully and creatively telling the story of the Louisiana Conference of the United Methodist Church. It is our belief that these missional priorities will help clarify our vision, frame our strategic work, together moving forward, even as we carry with us the lessons of the past. In a time where many annual conferences are pulling back, we are investing in our future, in our laity, in our clergy, in our local churches, and in our connection. These strategic missional priorities will guide that investment and frame our work this year. We invite you to discover how these priorities are shaping our time together at annual conference, and in turn, how it shapes ministry in Louisiana and in your community. Together, these priorities are how we want to live out our vision to build, connect, and equip disciples of Jesus Christ for a transformative future. As we invite you to consider how these priorities are shaping our time together at annual conference, and in turn, how you might incorporate these missional priorities into your local churches. We're a little bit curious about how you'll finish the following sentences. We are connecting with new generations and embracing the diversity of our communities so that we are building stronger churches by investing in congregational vitality and leadership development so that we are equipping both laity and clergy by creating a culture of call and helping people discover where God is leading them so that, and we are faithfully and creatively telling the story of what God is doing across the Louisiana Conference so that. What is your so that? What is your church's so that? What is our conference so that? You can scan the QR code on the screen to answer these questions. Or you can visit the table in the main hallway. Did you see the big Louisiana so that? Share your so that's with us, and we will share your responses throughout the conference over the next 2 days. It is our hope that they will guide and shape our holy conferencing. We're excited to be the United Methodist Church together. Let us build, connect, and equip ourselves as disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformative future God is calling us to embrace.
Let the church say amen. Amen. We thank you for your report. This is an information report, so we do not move for this. So let us prepare ourselves for lunch. Are you hungry?